the webinar today. We really appreciate the opportunity to have you here as Swati and I kind of talk through some things. My name is David Dowling. I am a co-owner and professional family mediator with the California Family Mediation Center. In my previous life, I was a law school professor, so I taught family law and mediation and different forms of mediation and dispute resolution for many years at Chapman University, and now teach part-time at Pepperdine Strauss Institute. So I love teaching, but mediation is really my passion, and I love working with my partners in our sister office in San Diego, the San Diego Family Mediation Center. With me today is a good friend and somebody that I have a lot of respect for, and I'm grateful that she was willing to give up her time today to join us for the webinar and kind of talk about family law. And I'm going to turn the time over for her to introduce herself. Swati.
Thanks, David, Amanda, and Rachel for inviting me to be here today. I am a certified family law specialist. I've been practicing for about 20 years, exclusively in the field of family law. I have a boutique firm in Anaheim, and my practice is, all over Southern California primarily. We don't really care where our clients take us. We try and do good work for our clients, and we're very passionate about what we do. And I've had the ability to work with David and his team, and they do fantastic work, and I have a lot of respect for the level of competency that I have seen in their mediation work. So it is truly a pleasure to be here with you and your team, David.
Thank you, Swati. And the same back, like part of the reason that Swati and I have developed this friendship is, as she said, we've worked together. And so myself and my partners just absolutely love recommending Swati's office to our clients. And we'll talk about this a little bit. Sometimes we have clients that come in to talk about mediation and we realize that it's not the right fit for them. And one thing you should know is that, it's the same for each of us when clients come in, and we really want to find the right fit for them. It's not about you're my client and I'm going to keep you. It's about finding what's the best path forward for them. And we will recommend clients over to Swati's firm because we know that she will advocate for them and she will represent them to the best of her abilities. And she does an amazing job in making sure that they feel safe and secure going through something that can be very traumatic and difficult for everybody, especially for, people with children, for families. And so she's very mindful of how she represents her clients. And that's why we refer people over to her. So Swati and I have actually had a couple of discussions recently with COVID-19 being, the news, everything that we're living with right now. I actually was just talking with my family this morning in Ireland. So I was talking with my parents and my sister. I called over there, and they're on a much stricter lockdown and seeing much tighter, tighter lockdown within their community. And so Swati and I have been chatting about this and what's going to happen next with the family court. So Swati, why don't you share some of your thoughts on what we can expect as we prepare for the courts to open up?
So obviously no one was prepared for COVID. And I'd say most courts, especially the family law courts, are just not technologically savvy enough to move forward and keep cases moving forward in the event of a crisis like this. And as a result of the court closures and limited accessibility, the courts just have not been able to move quick enough to allow video appearances or allow phone appearances, because there are many hearings that can be conducted in that fashion. Trials are obviously problematic because you need to introduce exhibits. You can't really do that by way of video conferencing. Maybe one day we will have the technology that will allow us to share screen and similar to what Zoom allows, but right now the courts are just inundated with this backlog, just not with hearing dates, but also mediation appointments for custody cases, documents that need to be reviewed and approved, such as judgments and orders. There's some counties have shut down and they're not even accepting new cases being opened. So if someone wants to file for divorce, they're unable to do so at this time. And it's just sitting there in the queue. So there is an unfortunate amount of backlog. And, family law although it is an area of great, there's a need to address the issues in family law cases on a more immediate basis than other areas of the law. But unfortunately, criminal takes priority over family law. So we have been notified that some of our judges in the family law department will be moving to the criminal law department, including clerks, because they get priority and the cases in criminal courts need to be pushed forward in a more expeditious fashion than even family law cases. So that's going to create an additional backlog. And so it's important that someone like David and his team can be used as a resource to help us address issues on a more immediate basis, even if it's a case that has a lot of contentious issues. If we can even streamline some of these issues and say, okay, let's go talk to a mediation expert and let's see if we can try and bridge the gap before we're waiting months, if not over a year, before you even get in front of a judge.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mentioned last week on our webinar, myself, Amanda, and Jen were talking. I have a good friend of mine who's a DA here in Orange County, and their office is almost essentially closed down. It's a ghost town over there, and there are only certain cases that are being processed right now. So when the court does open back up, as you said, a lot of resources are going to be shifted to deal with the really growing burden on the criminal court. You have things like the juvenile court that need a lot of resources. Even within family court, there's kind of a priority with domestic violence cases and cases that have urgency around, like custody of children, where there are petitions for protection of children. Those are going to take priority over, what are very important cases and cases that need to be heard. But the way that the court is going to do that, they're going to prioritize by urgency all the way down. And we already have a burdened system. We already have people who are waiting, as you said, in line, right? So when we file cases, those filings are put in line with every other filing that's submitted on that day. So there are cases that come in from all across the county, in every county, for divorce. And so those are put in line of when they come in. And now we've got a backlog, right? So the number of cases are just building up. And then, as you mentioned already, some cases can't even be filed in certain counties right now. So it's going to be tough when the court does open.
Correct. And the courts have been, they've been diligent about recognizing that there's going to be a huge backlog. I mean, there's no denying that. And many counties have implemented a voluntary settlement program where they want litigants to use as a resource to avoid having to wait their turn in line. I know just in Orange County, Judge Hurwitz has announced, he's the presiding judge in family law for Orange County. He's already said, good luck getting an evidentiary hearing in 2020. So sadly, as you said, David, there is a hierarchy of cases which are given priority in the family court system, and as there should be. And domestic violence is on the top of that list. So if you've got a domestic violence issue, the courts are open and they will hear those matters now by way of just written documents. And there's some counties that are actually allowing you to appear, like LA County. You can actually show up for your ex parte hearing. An ex parte is an emergency filing. So some counties are doing it just by way of, fax filing or e-filing, and some are actually allowing you to make a personal appearance for that emergency hearing. Secondly would be the child, as you stated, would be custody cases. And even within custody cases, there is a level of hierarchy, which there has to be. You're going to have those that are serious cases that are emergency issues, such as child abuse, child neglect, abduction, those sorts of cases. And then you're going to have everything else lumped together. And, some counties do have emergency investigations that they conduct when there is an emergency filing. But the problem we have is, how do we conduct an investigation when those departments and those branches of the family law departments are closed? So that is, even if you have some facts that give rise to an emergency, and you have some litigants who, for lack of a better word, don't necessarily give you the full story. And when they file their paperwork and they come across as there being a serious, immediate need for protective orders to be put in place, and let's say they falsified information or they didn't include the full scope of the facts, and then an order is made, and then that order sticks for a month, 2 months, 3 months, well, the other parent is unfortunately unable to have the court hear their side of the story until there's an actual hearing. So that could result in a parent not seeing their child for several months, having no contact, and these are really, really heartbreaking issues, and issues that we are dealing with right now, David. And I know we've talked about this.
Yeah.
That our clients, naturally we tell all of our clients, you have to lower your standards right now, because we can't run to court and we can't litigate every issue. And to help us move your case forward, let's sit down and let's have a dialogue. And let's find some common ground. You're not going to be happy with that, and the other party's not going to be happy with it, but we need to start somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I want to stress that, Swati and I, we all believe that, we want the staff at the court, we want these judges, we want these clerks to be safe, and so we support the fact that the courts are, on lockdown right now. We can't ask people to put their lives at risk during everything that's going on to process these cases. So we completely support and recognize that that's something that has to happen. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop the number of cases from continuing every day to build up people who want to file. And we also expect and anticipate, Swati and I have touched on this and talked about this before, that coming out of a lockdown, there are going to be more people who are realizing that maybe divorce is the way forward for them, because finding themselves in a shelter-in-place situation with a spouse, that they are realizing that maybe this isn't the marriage that they expected. So the number of cases that will be filed moving forward will increase. And Swati just, touched on, encouraging and trying to help people understand that this is a time to start working together. And I have clients that come in, we strictly do mediation. We have clients that come in and they're like, we want to mediate this, and they still find it difficult to compromise, to work together, even though they know that that's what they signed up for. And taking clients that come in for you, Swati, that are like, no, I don't want any compromise. I want a divorce and I'm not happy with this situation. I feel betrayed. I feel angry. I feel abandoned, whatever it might be. And then to hear from their attorney, we need to find some way to work together with the other side, with their attorney, and sit down and address some of these issues. Because if we don't, these are going to remain unresolved for a significant amount of time. And, we have so many cases that are going to get, heard ahead of, divorces. And one thing I would strongly encourage people to do is to not think that there's a way to sidestep the system. You can't go in and say, there's a domestic violence situation here, so we need to be heard, so our case will get heard ahead of everybody else's, because the court is aware of what those cases look like. These judges have extensive experience in hearing and meeting people involved in domestic violence situations. We encourage everybody who is in a situation like that to file and to let the court know and to contact the resources that are available for you. But even in civil, I would see people try to sidestep and cut the line by filing different kinds of petitions, thinking that that would expedite their case. And that's just not the case. Would you agree, Swati?
Absolutely. When you file a court document, everything that you say in there is under oath. It's under penalty of perjury. And if you're going to fabricate information to cut in front, you're going to have some consequences, and your credibility will be in question for all future hearings. And judges, they're pretty astute, and that's why they're judges. They can read people, and they remember that, oh, this is the litigant that filed this domestic violence case or this emergency custody case based on facts that they couldn't even back up, they couldn't prove. So you never want to file a request that doesn't have merit. Now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't file a request because you don't have enough proof, but it's true
Right.
that something may have happened. And that's not what I'm saying. Obviously, when you go to family court, there is a level of he said, she said. And the one that has the ability to prove by way of witnesses or documents does stand sometimes a better chance. Now, there may be someone who just comes across as very credible, and the other party may have documents, but they don't really make sense to the court, or they seem fabricated. So every case is assessed with its own set of facts. And I think what David initially touched on is that in terms of litigation versus mediation and people's mindset, when you go into mediation, the people that are participating in mediation, they already have the mindset of wanting to settle. When people come to my office, usually their mindset is, I want to fight. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult for us to change that mindset. And when we have cases that legitimately, I feel like I'm a therapist right now, just trying to coach them and guide them into changing their mindset. And it's very hard to do. But I have some clients who, when you have a good relationship with your client and they actually, they say, look, whatever you say, I'm willing to try. I embrace that, because that means, okay, we can at least try and send out a proposal, and it's going to be really different than the one that we had sent out pre-COVID. And you're going to let go of a lot of issues that you were making a stink about before. But that would be a better strategy than going to court and filing a frivolous case just to get in front of the line.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the one thing people have to understand is that even in mediation, when I get clients into mediation, it's not that we're going to bring you to some kind of middle ground where it's fair, because fairness is in the eye of the beholder, right? So what's fair to one person might not be fair to somebody else. And so in mediation and in litigation, what we're trying to do in mediation, the way we approach it is we want to understand what your goals and interests are, and then how you can achieve those in mediation. And sometimes you have to give a little to get a little, right? But that happens in litigation, and that's a part of negotiation. You have to work together. And so in order to progress your case, because progressing the case and moving forward enables you to really put a lot of the harm and the hurt behind you, right? Because sometimes we feel like that hurt and that pain is a blanket that we wrap ourselves up in, and we just sit there wrapped in this pain and this hurt, and it's not healthy. It's not good for our mental and emotional well-being. And so sometimes what it takes is an attorney like Swati or going to mediation to understand that we need to put that aside and think about our future and think about creating a healthier path for ourselves. And so right now, because of the backlog of cases, because the courts are going to be so overwhelmed, there's going to be more of an encouragement and more of, I don't want to say a push, but more of an emphasis on trying to find ways to resolve. So whether you choose mediation or go to an attorney like Swati, you're going to find in both worlds a strong encouragement to reconsider that fight and consider ways to sit down and work together. And I know that Swati is, as she said, 20 years a member of the family law community. So she knows the people in the community. She's worked with them. She knows who she's dealing with. So if you go to her office and you say, this is who my ex's attorney is, she'll know them and she'll know how best to approach them and what their response is going to be to a lot of the issues that you're raising. Would you agree?
Yes. And when you have a litigious case, sometimes it's not necessarily the parties that are even making it litigious. It can be the attorneys that are making it litigious. And when you have been in a specific area of the law for a long time, you get to know which attorneys you can settle cases, which issues you can settle, and which issues you can't settle. And it's sad, but that is just a reality. And it's oftentimes litigants try and find the type of attorney that represents and emulates their own personalities. So if they're hiring an attorney that's just going to fight and not be reasonable, then it makes it challenging for us to try and settle cases.
And you can find those attorneys out there. They're everywhere, right?
In every field, absolutely. Yeah. And that doesn't make them a good lawyer.
No.
You're doing a disservice to your client if you can't settle cases or issues in cases that should settle. And no client should have to go through a 4 or 5 year ordeal. And people need closure. They need to move on. And David and his team and I both share that sentiment that you come in, cases come in, clients come in, and we just want to help them close this chapter and move on so they can start a new chapter in their life. And sometimes it requires someone like me, and sometimes it can be done by someone like David and his team. So it really just depends on the level of acrimony and the type of issues that people have. And, right now I've got a client who, has some serious issues, but they're not related to domestic violence or custody. It's regarding management and control of a community business. And they are at odds with one another, and there is the potential to lose a lot of money. And if we go into court and ask for emergency orders, there's also the risk that if it's denied, that now the other party will think they have the upper hand because the request was denied. So it's difficult right now to also gauge what issues we should present to a judge, because right now they don't have much time to deal with every emergency. It really needs to be a very serious life-threatening issue or a custody issue.
Yeah, and building off of that, and we have a question that I'm going to get to, but building off of that, just understand that, Swati talked about 4 to 5 year cases, and I have friends who've been in family and divorce cases for several years. The costs just go up and up and up and up. And what you're doing is you're working to pay your family law case, right? And so you're going out and every penny that you're bringing in, you're trying to figure out how to feed your family and how to pay for this fight. And so that's the reason that Swati and I work well together is because we also don't believe that this should cost you a house or the down payment on a house. There are ways to do this and to get through this process in a much more economical way. So we have a question come in, and I'm going to throw this to you, Swati. So what do you do when one party wants to mediate but the other wants to litigate? So what do you have if you have a client comes to you and they say, I'm here because the other party wants to litigate, but I'd actually prefer to mediate and try to resolve this? So what would be your approach? And then I'll talk about what I do, because I have this come in as well.
This happens a lot. And, I ask them, well, tell me, when you think of mediation, what does that mean to you? And let's talk about the issues in your case. Let's list them. Let's talk about what's your position and what do you believe is the other party's position. And sometimes just by going through that exercise, we're able to see you guys are really far apart. You want to mediate, but you're on this side of the page and he's on this side of the page. How are we going to bridge that gap? And it could be, something like spousal support, where maybe wife hasn't worked for, 8 years of the marriage and she's been at home with the kids, and husband has a job where he's making $500,000 a year, and he says, you're going to have to go to work and I'm going to subject you to a vocational examination because I want to make sure that you are working to your fullest potential. And wife says, well, he agreed. He promised me that I could stay at home and take care of the kids. And now he's reneging on that. I need them to understand, and I just educate them that you got to flush that down the toilet. Those agreements don't hold up in court. Yeah. And so once I have that dialogue with them, I'm able to better understand and tell them the reality. And the reality may be, sorry, we can't. And I let them come to that conclusion on their own. I say, well, do you see what I mean by mediation versus litigation? Do you see yourself going to mediation with someone like him or her? And then they say, oh gosh, you're right. I get it now. And then I may have the reverse, right? Someone that comes in wanting to litigate and fight because they hate them, they're angry, they cheated, or they stole their money, they gambled it, and now we've got nothing. Our house is in foreclosure. They're angry, they're upset. But then if there's nothing to fight about, why do you want to go to court? Let's mediate this. So it really depends on what we're dealing with and just talking it through with the client. And that's why we have consultations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so we do the same thing. So we have a consultation, we bring people in, and I'll sometimes have somebody come in and say, look, I would like to mediate, but the other person has already talked to an attorney, and I'll say to them, okay, well, let's kind of like Swati just said, let's think about what your goals and interests are. What are you hoping to achieve here? What do you think their main concerns are? And let's think if there is a way for them to come and sit down at the mediation table. So once I meet with one person, I'm able to meet with the other person too and avail them of a free consult so they can come in, sit down and meet with me. Sometimes they're fearful, they're apprehensive about what the process of mediation is going to mean for them. So I'll say, I'll meet with them, I'll answer any questions that they might have. And with that, what I'll always do is the person that comes in to meet with me initially is then I will offer them the names of an attorney like Swati. So I'll say, okay, I understand they're talking to an attorney. I'd love to meet with them to answer any questions or concerns they might have about trying to resolve this and mediating the divorce. But let me give you the names of, I always give at least 2 attorneys' names so that they have choices, right? So they have, some people feel more comfortable with a female attorney, others feel more comfortable with a male attorney. Some say, oh, this attorney's office is in this part of the city, this attorney's office is in this part of the city. So I try to give them a couple of options, a couple of choices, and say to them, contact both, talk to both of them, and see who you feel more comfortable with if we're unable to get into mediation. Because what I want to do is give people that support. So if they come in and they do want to mediate, I want to try as much as we can to get them to the mediation table. If that's not going to happen, I want to make sure that they have somebody, a resource that they can go talk to, somebody that I trust. I have clients that I have currently working with me that are in mediation, and I will recommend an attorney to them like Swati so that they can go to her to consult with through the process. So they'll take some questions that they'll have, some things they've agreed to. They'll go meet with Swati, sit down and talk with her and make sure that they feel like what they're doing is they're on the right path. And so there is an opportunity for overlap and an opportunity for us to work together in a lot of different respects. We just got another question in. Both me and my soon-to-be ex have lawyers, but couldn't file because the courts are closed. If we decided to work with a mediator instead and decided all the issues on paper now, when can we actually file the mediation agreement since the courts aren't open? Okay, so the other party can agree now, but if they change their mind between now and the court's opening. So we actually are taking clients in, we're taking in new cases because we have clients that are coming to us and saying, look, the courts aren't open, what's going on? So we can get you started on the mediation process. We can prepare the documents to file with the court. We can meet with you. We can get going on the mediation, sit down, go through things like the parenting plan, come up with those agreements, and basically have everything ready. Now we anticipate that the courts are going to open up in June. Is that correct, Swati? That's what I understand.
Correct.
Early June. And so what we always tell litigants is, if we have everything ready and we file everything, we usually encourage our parties to think about it taking anywhere from 2 to 6 months for the filing to get through the court, because you don't know what's going to go on. What we are trying to tell people now is we don't know. So just be patient with the process, be patient with the courts. So it can take longer. I have clients that right before the courts closed down, we filed their final documents, their marital settlement agreement, all the final documents for their divorce. And they called me a couple of weeks ago and she said, so what's going on? And I was like, remember I told you it would take 2 to 6 months. So now we're going to say 2 to we don't know how many months. So we're just going to be patient with the process and just allow the courts to work through because the staff at the court, the clerks are going to be overwhelmed anyway. So Swati, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like that question. So there are 3 steps to every single divorce case that have to be followed. Number 1 is getting your case filed, which requires the filing of a petition. So whether you go to a lawyer or a mediator, that's the first step that we have to, in order to start the case. The second step is to get your disclosures done. And we call that the preliminary declarations of disclosures. And that has to be exchanged by both sides. And then the final document would be your judgment. Your settlement agreement is attached to your judgment package. So those are the 3 steps, and that's the skeleton of every divorce case. And then you throw meat on the skeleton depending on what issues you have. So as David stated, which he is absolutely correct, that you got to follow these steps, and we would file things when the courts open. We've had, when COVID happened, we had clients come in wanting to file, but we couldn't file their cases because the courts were closed. So what we've done is we've served an unfiled petition to the other party or their attorney if they've already retained an attorney, and we've worked with the other attorney to keep the case moving forward. We've completed the preliminary declarations of disclosures with no case number, no, it's an unusual time that we're in. We're just trying to be creative and work together, knowing that our clients want to move the case forward. So we satisfy prong 1, prong 2 of the divorce case. Even responses are being served, even though no petition's been filed. And so once we finish prong 1 and prong 2, the question is, can we sign a full settlement agreement even though no case has ever been filed? So this is all uncharted territory for every attorney. We don't know whether or not it would be enforceable. If it was signed and notarized, would it be binding? We have a difficult time, I think, believing that it wouldn't be, because you've satisfied all the steps needed as if the courts were open and you did have an active case number. So we are pushing the case in that direction for cases for parties that are willing to do that. What we're telling them, this may not work. We may file your petition and we may file your proof of service that you've completed your disclosures, and then file your settlement agreement, and the court may wonder, why is the settlement agreement dated for some date that predates the filing of your petition? So these are just nuances that I want you to consider, but these are ideas that you can take back to your attorneys if you're eager to move your case forward and want to keep it pushing. But there are risks associated with that, in that it's possible that a court could say that your agreement is not valid because no petition was ever filed. But I have a hard time believing that a court would do something like that. Yeah. So I would recommend, and I am recommending to all of our clients, if they want to do that, we're with them. I mean, the courts are not open, so we've got the time to work up a lot of cases right now.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing. So we're bringing parties in, and as Swati said, there's the initial petition. We use the time in the middle to do the exchanges of disclosures, but we do all of that through mediation. We work on the parenting plan and everything else, draft up your settlement agreement, your final petition papers, and file those in stage 1, 2, and 3. Right now, we're bringing parties in. We're preparing the paperwork for the initial petition, and then we're meeting with them to do things like the exchange of information, the disclosures, to do the parenting plan, come up with the agreements around parenting, child support, spousal support, anything else that, property division. And so we're drafting that final settlement agreement. But one thing I should say is that, we take this none of this stuff happens within a week, right? So we've got, if you haven't filed yet and you're thinking about coming in, by the time the court opens, we will be able to file those initial petitions and start working on the rest of things. So I have clients that come in, and they come in October of 2018, and I'm still working with them because they're just taking their time to work through and come in for the next sessions. I have other clients that come in, and they'll come in 1 week and they'll be like, can we come in 2 weeks time? And I'm like, sure. And so we take it at your pace, how quickly you want to get in and get your mediation sessions done. But to what Swati said, I have a hard time believing that if you come up with an agreement in mediation, if you've sat down, if you've worked together, if you're both represented by attorneys, or you're doing it voluntarily through mediation, and you sign off on an agreement, and that agreement goes to a court, and then somebody's like, well, that a court won't sit there and say, you signed this, you were represented, or you're in mediation, and this is what you really wanted. And so I'm going to sign off on this, because I think the courts will support what you're doing if you're trying your hardest to do something and get it accomplished. I know that there's always a fear. I have parties come in all the time and they say, well, unless we sign something and the judge signs off and have we really agreed? And I say, look, for the other person to pull back now would be unnecessarily difficult, because they're on this path and they're agreeing and they're working with you. And to undo agreements can be disastrous for everybody involved and put you on a path that could take a lot longer to accomplish what you want. You're both working together, so there has to be an element of trust. And that's the hardest thing in these cases, right? I say this to clients all the time, right? They come in and trust has been damaged, right? So when you've got couples that are divorcing, to say, trust the other person, that when they say this is what they're agreeing to, this is what they're going to agree to. And we recognize it. Swati and I deal with it, and my partners, we deal with it every day. It's difficult to trust. It's difficult to say, okay, this is what we're agreeing to, this is what we're signing off on, without a fear that the other person's going to renege on that deal. But we are working hard. We're going to try to encourage and support you to work through this process. I think we've got 3 weeks and then the courts should be open.
Well, LA County isn't opening until June 22nd.
They pushed it out. Yeah.
So
it's going to be interesting, because once the courts do open, there is going to be a line around the block of people trying to get in and figure out what's going on, because there were so many cases currently in the system, and we've got attorneys and parties that are trying to figure out what the status is of their current cases that were in the process, and that doesn't even get to and include the cases that are waiting to be filed. And as I said, we'd heard when the lockdown was lifted in China that there was a significant increase in divorces filed over there. There are so many people that are on lockdown in difficult situations right now. I'm married, I have 4 children. Just being under stay-at-home orders with all 4 of my children at the same time, my wife and I, not fun, right? It's not, we love our kids and we're finding so many great experiences from this, but it still adds stress. And you have people with anxiety, you have people who have depression, you have people with mental health issues. You have children who are developing anxiety and depression and mental health issues. And so without additional resources and support, this is a very difficult time for a lot of families. And so you have resources. I would say, we touched a little earlier about filing certain kinds of petitions like domestic violence. For me, what I would recommend is find somebody like Swati first. If you think that your case, could potentially you might be able to file something to expedite your case, meet with somebody like Swati first, talk to an expert in the field, talk to somebody who can advise you, because they understand what the judges are looking to and what the process is. So rather than trying to file some stuff and getting lost in the system, go talk to an expert who can help you on the path to getting your case heard and getting to the right people at the right time.
And if you came to me, or any other attorney, and you said, okay, I want a consultation. So let's say I meet with a potential client, and then they call back and they say, oh, we want to mediate. Well, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to send you off to a, mediation firm, a mediation expert like David, he is an attorney, and he has all of we have the same legal background, but he has just obtained the necessary credentialing and training to focus on mediation, and he's made that his niche practice. And you will find that some attorneys do also, just regular attorneys that also go to court, do mediation. And the difference between David and his team is that this is all they do. They don't do anything other than mediation. And I've had the opportunity to review your settlement agreements. Oh boy, are they long and detailed, and they don't leave any stone unturned. I mean, they do a fantastic job with their agreements, and they think of everything, and they're unique, and the terms that are in the agreement are so specific to those parties that they were working with. And it's not a cookie cutter document. And that's what impresses me about their firm over any other mediation firm whose judgments I have reviewed, or settlement agreements I have reviewed. And they're sometimes just the cookie cutter agreements, and there isn't a lot of creativity in them. So I see that firsthand from the work that David and his team put out.
Thank you. As you can see, those of you who are watching, Swati and I obviously clearly have a lot of mutual respect for each other. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people get confused about, is that they think that we're, as a mediator and an attorney, we're in competition with each other. And I think we both, our services and what we do complement each other in so many different ways. And I think that now in this COVID-19 world, we're going to find that our worlds overlap so significantly. And, we really do think that there will be so many opportunities for us to work together. And I actually just got a question that goes along with that. Can you mediate with an attorney representing you? And so Swati and I have talked about this, and we, our practice, generally what we do is we work with clients themselves, and we encourage them to meet with an attorney and talk to an attorney. But I think, moving forward, we're going to open up. I've worked with a lot of cases where I have attorneys on both sides, and I'm very comfortable with that. And I think that, where we have two attorneys like Swati that encourage their clients to mediate, we're certainly happy to have you come in and sit down and work with us. And so what are your thoughts on that, Swati?
Oh, I'm so excited, David. I was ecstatic when you and I spoke. And, there aren't a lot of mediators in family law that just do what you do to the level of with the level of expertise that you do it with. And I know your practice has been primarily with just parties, and I know you work with attorneys, and you've spent time at the courthouse as a mediator working with attorneys. So there's no reason for why private attorneys should not have the opportunity to work with you directly without having the need to go through the court process and having you appointed from the courts to serve as a voluntary mediator. So I'm excited to recommend you in cases that we have that we feel that mediation would be helpful, and I have no doubt that you will be a fantastic resource for the community.
Thank you, Swati. I actually just got one of the participants in the room right now just sent me a separate message through Facebook. Our sister office is actually in San Diego. So Amanda, who just left the room, but you can see her picture right there as our moderator. So Amanda and Jen, my partners based at the San Diego Family Mediation Center, they are based in San Diego, and they would be able to help you. I will send you a link on this message that you just sent me to their website and contact information so that you can reach out and work with them. There we go. Yeah, can hear me. Okay. So we work with cases in San Diego County, in Orange County, in Riverside County. As Swati said herself, we're more than happy to work with anybody, anywhere, as she is herself and her team. So there are so many resources available to you. And I think that there's a link just being sent out everybody now for you to get to the San Diego website. It looks like our time is done. That hour went very fast. The first few minutes were surprising and not what I anticipated with this whole thing. And I apologize to anybody that was in the room. Literally before we opened it up to invite people to come in, we had been talking about Zoom bombing and about just abuse happening in Zoom rooms. I think one thing that I'm aware of, I'd actually shared with everybody before we started the Zoom webinar, was that my 13-year-old nephew, his classroom had been bombed with some of this horrific, ugly stuff. And, it's just unfortunate that we have people today who want to spread ugliness and hate in the world. And so we apologize for anybody that was here and that had to listen to that or witness any of that. But thank you for your time today. And Swati, thank you. I just am so grateful that you're willing to give your time today to come and sit and chat with me and kind of share your thoughts on everything. And I hope we can do this again.
Likewise, I had a good time.
Okay, good. This was a lot of fun. Well, we're